So we're sitting now just about 2 weeks away from the NFL draft, and with the Denver Broncos news cycle a little bit dead and dry right now, I feel like now's a good time to dive into the team's roster and pick out which position groups still need a little bit of work heading into the draft cycle. Although the Denver Broncos did do a really good job addressing key positions of need in free agency, I feel like there are still 7 positions where they could still add to the team during the draft as well as undrafted free agency. I also wouldn't rule out the team picking up some cheap veteran free agents here and there, although they are a little bit limited in terms of cap space. So before we jump into the key positions that I still feel like the Denver Broncos need to address this offseason, if you could just do me a favor and smash the like button on this video as well as subscribe to the channel, I would really appreciate it. Those are 2 free and easy ways to show your support for the channel. It helps tell YouTube's algorithm to push us out to fellow members of Broncos country just like you and me. So the first position that I feel like the team needs to address in the draft is the running back position. Javonte Williams is coming off of a multi-ligament knee injury, and there is concern within the Denver Broncos building about his availability for next season. There's a chance that Williams could miss most, if not all, of the 2023 season, so as a contingency plan in free agency, the team signed former Bengals running back Samaje Perine. They also added former Saints running back Tony Jones Jr., but he's more of a special teams addition than anything else in my opinion. Aside from those 3 players, the Broncos have Demarie Crockett, Tyler Beatty, and Tyreek McAllister as the other running backs on their roster. Those 3 guys are relatively unproven commodities, and Crockett is coming off of a torn ACL last year. I feel like the Broncos may want to add a speedier, change of pace running back in the draft that can rip off a big, explosive run at any time. It wouldn't surprise me at all, actually, if the Broncos used one of their 3rd round picks on a running back. Now, you can also find really good players in the later rounds as well. Phillip Lindsay was an undrafted free agent, and then last year we got Isaiah Pacheco from the Chiefs, who I believe was a 7th round draft pick if I'm not mistaken. However, Sean Payton and George Payton have been able to find stud running backs in the 3rd and 4th round. See guys like Dalvin Cook and Alvin Kamara. If the Broncos feel like they can find the next Dalvin Cook or Alvin Kamara, I would not be surprised at all if they went ahead and pulled the trigger and drafted an early round back. One guy I would definitely keep an eye on is Zach Charbonnet out of UCLA. The next position group is a group that I feel like the Broncos absolutely have to address in the draft this year, and that is tight end. Currently, the Broncos have just 3 tight ends on their roster: Greg Dulcich, Chris Manhertz, and Albert O. Albert O ended up falling completely out of favor with the previous coaching regime, and to say that he is on the roster bubble would be a massive understatement. The Broncos did bring in Chris Manhertz in free agency, who has familiarity with our current coaching staff, but he's more of a blocking tight end and can't really be expected to contribute much in the passing game. So that leaves just Greg Dulcich as the only proven commodity as a pass-catching tight end on the Broncos roster. The team desperately needs a tight end too, and unless they really believe that Albert O could get out of the doghouse, it would not surprise me at all if they drafted a tight end to fill that role. I just feel like it would be good business in general to add a tight end in the draft, or at least an undrafted free agency. Even if Albert O's play next year does go back to a respectable level, he's still in the final year of his contract, and I don't anticipate the team will re-sign him. The reason teams like the Philadelphia Eagles are so successful is because they go ahead and they address their needs a year earlier than they really need to. Yeah, the Eagles lost a bunch of guys in free agency this year, but they already had most of their replacements on the roster. If the Broncos really want to be a winning organization moving forward, then they really need to take a similar approach. Because of this, I feel like it is strongly imperative that the Broncos add a tight end in the draft, or at least bare minimum an undrafted free agency. So the next group is kind of a conglomeration of 3 positions. I feel like the Broncos really need to add some depth on the interior offensive line, and I really feel like they need a new starting center. The Broncos brought in Ben Powers on a 4-year deal in free agency to replace Dalton Reisner at left guard, and they're hoping that Quinn Miners can be our right guard of the future. They also signed Mike McGlinchey to be our starting right tackle, and Garrett Bowles will be returning at left tackle from his season-ending injury last year. So our starting tackles are set, and our 2 starting guards are set, Then, at center, there's Lloyd Cushenberry. He is somebody that I have talked about ad nauseum on this channel. He is consistently overwhelmed in pass protection, and in year 4, he does not have the play strength of an NFL caliber center. I think he's decent at some of the mental stuff involved in the center position, such as identifying the front and calling out the mic, but still, man, if you're getting overwhelmed in pass protection, that's not going to bode well for you. Right now, Cushenberry sticks out like a sore thumb as a weak link on the Broncos' offensive line. In my previous video, one possibility that I talked about was the Broncos bringing in Dalton Risner to compete for the starting center position. Risner's kind of floundered on the free agent market, and at this point, he may have to settle for some sort of one-year prove-it deal. This idea was certainly perplexing amongst Broncos country, but I proposed the possibility of the team bringing in Dalton Risner to possibly compete for the starting center job, because at least he wouldn't have to change cities and move to a completely different area. He's from Colorado and he could stay here in Colorado. That alone could entice Dalton Risner to potentially return, so he can compete with Lloyd Cushenberry as well as fellow free agent signee Kyle Fuller for the starting center job, and in my opinion, he's probably the best player of those three. Now, another possibility at center is a guy like John Michael Schmitz falling to the Broncos in the 3rd round, but I really don't see that happening. They could also bring in a free agent such as Ben Jones or Connor McGovern, but at this point, I feel like they would have already done that if they were going to. I don't know, man. I'm just not confident at all in Lloyd Cushenberry moving forward. Perhaps the organization feels a different way, but personally, I feel like the team really needs to bring in, at bare minimum, competition for him, and more solid competition than Kyle Fuller. They also have Luke Wattenberg on the roster, a 5th-round pick from last year, but he was a guy who was drafted by our previous regime, and if I'm being completely honest, he's a guy that really needs to spend some time in a developmental league such as the XFL or the USFL, get the necessary reps, and quite frankly develop the play strength necessary to be an NFL caliber offensive lineman. Now, I do feel like the team also needs to add some depth at guard, but we have our starters solidified there, so I feel like the team may look towards the undrafted free agent well or the cheap veteran free agent well to fill that void. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball, I feel like the Broncos have a pretty solid interior defensive line unit, but they could really use another defensive end to fill the void left by Deshaun Williams. The team signed former Cardinal Zach Allen in free agency, and they also have DJ Jones, Mike Purcell, and Matt Henningsen as sort of the main guys, and then they've got Jonathan Harris, Ioma Wazurike, Elijah Garcia, and Jordan Jackson as sort of developmental depth pieces. If we could just add maybe one more defensive end to that group, I feel like that's a really solid unit for us. I know the team really likes Matt Henningsen, and maybe they're expecting him to take a step forward next year, but I feel like the team may want to at least add some insurance at that position at bare minimum. Baron Browning and Randy Gregory are our top 2 guys, with Nick Bonito, Jake Martin, and Jonathan Cooper as the top depth guys. The team also has Aaron Patrick, who has some game experience, although in a limited capacity, and they also have former undrafted free agent out of Alabama, Christopher Allen, on their roster. Allen's an interesting piece. He certainly has potential. He's got a lot of talent, but injuries have been a concern for him, and he spent all of last year on IR. Injuries are also a concern with Randy Gregory, as we well know. He ended up missing most of last season, and Nick Bonito is a guy who really struggled in his rookie year. Hopefully the former 2nd-round pick will take a step forward in his game, but with Gregory's injury history as well as Nick Bonito's inconsistencies, I feel like the team really needs to add a more consistent contributor at edge rusher in the draft. In fact, it would not surprise me at all if the Broncos once again use their top overall pick on an edge rusher. You can never have too much depth at that position, and given all the question marks and unknowns that we have there, the Broncos really need to address edge rusher in the draft. Moving on to the secondary, at corner, I feel like the team could probably add some more depth in terms of an outside boundary guy. Currently, the team has their top 3 set with Pat Surtain as cornerback 1, Damari Mathis as cornerback 2 on the boundary, and K'Wan Williams as our starting nickel. The team did add Tremon Smith in free agency, but he's more of a return guy than a corner. The team has some solid depth in terms of nickel and dime guys, in my opinion. They've got Isane Bassi, Fayon Hicks, Delonte Hood, Daquan McMillan, and Devon Key, but in my opinion, the team needs to add some more depth at boundary corner. If Damari Mathis goes down, are you really confident in Tremon Smith stepping up as our number 2 corner? Because I sure am not. It wouldn't surprise me if the team went down the draft well here, or they could possibly add some cheap free agent later on in the offseason. Either way, I feel like the team needs a more proven commodity than Tremon Smith in case Pat Surtain or Damari Mathis go down. I have confidence at our depth at nickel if K'Wan Williams were to get hurt, but the same cannot be said at boundary corner. Finally, the last position group that I feel like the team still needs to add some depth to is the safety position. Of course, Justin Simmons is a stud and one of the best safeties in the NFL, but alongside him, they have Caden Stearns penciled in to be our starting strong safety. Stearns is coming off of a season-ending hip injury, so I definitely have some concerns there. Although there is a small chance that the team could bring Kareem Jackson back, I wouldn't be surprised at this point if he's not contemplating retirement. For a depth piece, the Broncos brought back PJ Locke, who's not only an elite special teams player, but was solid when he got defensive playing time last year, and they also have former 2022 draft pick Delarian Turner-Yell on the roster. But they do not have any safeties behind them, and I do feel like the team will definitely add an undrafted safety or two, but also they really could use some more depth in the event that Caden Stearns or Justin Simmons go down. I do like PJ Locke quite a bit, but I feel like they need to add one more proven depth guy there, and then I feel like they will be really solid at safety. So overall, Broncos country, the team definitely did a good job addressing some key positions of need in free agency, but overall, there's still some work to be done. The Broncos have 5 draft picks as of April 10th, and the team has already said they want to get some more picks in this year's draft. George Paton has always been in the business of having as close to 10 picks as possible, and he told the media at the NFL League owners meeting that there's a strong chance the team will trade down to acquire more picks. The team likes to view draft picks as darts on a dartboard. The more darts you have, the greater chance you have of hitting. So overall, Broncos country, what positions do you still feel like the team needs to address both in the draft and in undrafted free agency? Drop those comments down below. I would love to hear from you. Be sure to leave a like on this video as well as subscribe and ring the bell so these videos appear in your notification feed. And while you're at it, guys, be sure to follow me on Twitter at Gage Madrid NFL for continuing Broncos coverage. And for now, guys, this has been another episode of Denver Broncos Syndicate. I am your host, Gage Madrid, saying peace out.